Hi everyone, my name is John. Welcome back to my channel. You may have noticed last month, May, that at least two really big university presses that I love, Yale University Press and Princeton University Press, both had a big sale that lasted for the entire month. And I usually try to be more diligent about letting people who watch this channel know when sales go on, at least sales that I know of. But I don't think I posted an announcement or made a video or anything. But there was one, more than one. And usually I go crazy at the Princeton University Press sales. I did last spring, when they had a 75% off sale. I ended up buying something like 35 books. All of those books are, if you want to go back and look, it's April and May of last year. I think I posted it in 3 parts. But I didn't buy anything from Princeton University Press this year because it was only 50% off, and you still had to pay for shipping. So I just went to Yale University Press instead. And same thing there. Everything I think that was published before the end of April 2025 was on sale, and you got free shipping. So I took advantage of that. And I bought, more on this in a second, I think the intention was to buy 9 books, but I ended up buying 10. Like I said, I'll get into that in a minute. The first one, because it's so unwieldy, and I've already shown it to you before, this is one of the ones I started last month. I'm reading it with someone else in Historathon. Haven't gotten any further than the last time I showed it to you, but it is big. If you can hear that, it's kind of like a coffee table book, but it is from Yale University Press, and it's called The AngloSaxon World by Nicholas J. Higham and Martin J. Ryan. And this is like beautifully illustrated, and goes over pretty much, just illuminated manuscripts, archaeological finds, numismatic finds, literature, arts, jewelry, architecture. It starts when Rome is sort of winding down and looking to, 4th, 5th century, when Rome is on its way out and eventually has to make its big exit from the Isle of Great Britain. It's no longer able to, keep the peace there, keep infrastructure there. Rome, at least in the West, has crumbled. But the Angles and Saxons and other tribes sort of come forward and take the place of Rome over a period of the next few centuries. And this book tells that story, like I said, up 4th or 5th century AD through, roughly when the Anglo-Saxon world ends, which would be kind of 1066, the Norman invasion. So if you're looking for just a one-stop shop that'll give you a quick and dirty introduction to most topics of the Anglo-Saxon world, like I said, art, literature, architecture, urban growth, this is not only well written, it's also beautiful to look at. So I think I got it on sale for, not to be crass, but the prices were good. I think I got it for $13 on the sale. So more than happy to pay that, also with, like I said, no shipping. So from now on, what I'll try to do is go through things in chronological order very roughly, now that one big book is out of the way. I I lean into Goodreads reviews pretty heavily when I don't know too much about a subject. And all of these have pretty good Goodreads reviews. And I know Timothy McIntosh Smith's name from other books he's written. He wrote a travel trilogy about another Arabic-speaking polymath whose name is not coming to mind. Is it Ibn Battuta, possibly? Maybe. I've always wanted to find those somewhere. But I will settle for this. This is his Arabs, a 3,000-year history of peoples, tribes, and empires. And this obviously, being a 3,000-year history, it goes well back before the rise of Islam, which was early 7th century. And this looks at the formation of and rise of the Arabic language, which is interesting too, because I have in mind at least a sort of a longish project of learning all about the Middle East. Islam is a religion, and I have enough books. I just need to cobble them together and get through enough to call it a project. But one of my favorite recent discoveries the past couple of years in the podcast world is called History and Literature, the History and Literature podcast. And on the 15th of every month, that podcast comes out with a new episode. They're very, very long episodes, sometimes 2 to 2.5 hours long. And the second most recent episode was about Jahili poetry, which is the poetry, the one of the forms of literature that was really popular in the generations coming up to Muhammad. So late 6th, early 7th centuries. And they had, 2 hours on Jahili poetry, which was just fascinating. I will try to link that website below if I remember. But this takes us all the way up through, early 21st century, not terribly long ago. So I have a few just catch-all books about the Middle East, Arab people. I have Albert Hordani, his book that he came out with in the late 80s or 90s. I just need to, like I said, make a project out of it and read them. Next up is, so you're going to notice a kind of common theme with a lot of these. It's not because I ordered them in quarter 2, I promise. It's just one of my big reading interests is medieval history, and a lot of these books are about English medieval history specifically. And this is Levi Roach's biography of Ethel Red the Unready. This is not part of Yale's Monarch series, which is a thing that they have, maybe 20, 25, 30 biographies of monarchs done by really well-known scholars who have studied said monarch for their entire life. This is just a standalone, unassociated biography. But Ethel Red, his name actually means ill-advised, ill-counseled, something like that. He was the King of England from 978 to 1013, and then his kingship was sort of taken from him by Sven Forkbeard, and then just before he died, he became king again for a couple of years. He died in 1016. But Ethelred the Unready was the great-great-grandson of Alfred the Great. Lots of greats there. One of the things he's noted for, I guess, is fighting against the Danes, against the Vikings, in something called the St. Brice's Day Massacre, which I think was in 1003. 1004. And he has sort of a mixed reputation. He's usually known as not a great success of a king, but simply because someone isn't a great success running their country doesn't mean that they led an uninteresting life. And I would read pretty much any biography of a medieval king or queen, or person for that matter. But I mean, the pictures are not nearly as interesting, and they're in black and white. But this is certainly someone I could stand to learn a little bit more about. So, Ethel Red the Unready by Levi Roach. So we'll move on from the late 10th and early 11th centuries to the 12th century, the long 12th century. This is by Richard Huscroft, and this is Tales from the Long 12th Century. And this is 10 vignettes. No, it's actually 12. I'm sorry. It's 12. No, wait. That's photographs. That's illustrations. It is 10. Starting with William Atheling and the White Ship, which happened in 1120. And then you have, I'll just hold it up there and maybe you can see the topics that it's not horribly blurry. I don't know. Sorry if it is. But you have everything from William Atheling and the White Ship. That's the first story. And you have Herbert of Bosham and the Becket dispute with Henry II. Henry Fitzroy and his troublesome family. And it ends with Nicola de Hay and the defense of England, who Nicola de la Hay was a woman who became a sheriff in, was it Nottingham? In the beginning of the 13th century. That's why it's called the Long 12th Century. But anyway, some of the stories here are going to be more familiar. The White Ship, Thomas Becket, and Henry II. And some will be less familiar. But I liked the sort of shortened format, 20, 25 page stories, and there being 10 of them. So there's that. And then something I was really happy to find. So when it comes to English history, I think maybe my strongest periods of what I know most about might be, say, Anglo-Saxon England through the 12th century. Okay. But this is a little bit after that. And it is when I actually saw these, I thought they were two different versions of the same book because, well, the covers are exactly the same except the color. And, I mean, exactly the same. Except I guess the blurbs on them are different. And I didn't notice that they were actually different books until I saw the dates were different. And it's big now that you see it in front of you, but on the website it looks much smaller. So this is a 2-volume biography by David Carpenter of Henry III. This is the first volume. This is Henry III, The Rise to Power and Personal Rule, 1207 to 1258 by David Carpenter. And is it big? It is big. It's big. With notes and everything, we're talking over 750 pages. Okay? But Henry III became king when his father, who was King John, died when he was 9. and that was in 1216. And he is king for a very long time, like 56 years. So for most of the 13th century, Henry III is sitting on the throne. And much like his father, he is kind of like Ethel Red the Unready. He's not considered a terribly effective king. He is kind of a spendthrift, doesn't make the greatest decisions, puts his faith in a lot of foreign actors. And you can see the date there that separates Volume 1 from Volume 2 is 1258, which is when his barons make him sign something called the Provisions of Oxford, which tell him that he needs to start paying more attention to his barons, and that he needs a parliament, in effect, and that he can't keep spending money the way he is, and making decisions the way he does, irresponsibly. So that gets things off to a really bad start between his barons and Henry III, and that sort of sets the ground for Volume 2, which is not quite as long, but still over 700 pages. This is the same, like I said, the same cover there. This is Henry III, Reform, Rebellion, Civil War, Settlement, 1258 to 1272, also by David Carpenter. So I think things actually come to a head in 1262, 1263, with something called the Second Barons' War, which is a rebellion against most of Henry's barons, the most popular one being, of course, Simon de Montfort, who eventually ends up losing the rebellion and his life at the Battle of Evesham a few years later. And then Henry dies in 1272. But this is the last 14 years of his reign, once things really get serious with the barons and their eventual, like I said, loss of, well, it was a civil war. But just as a visual feast there, it's kind of a lot, but it'll be maybe a project for Q2 of 2026. All right. 3 more books, depending on how you count. This is also something else that looked really, really good on Goodreads. And I know a lot of Americans love Tutor England. So obviously Tutor England is much further in the future than anything I'm familiar with as far as English history goes. But if anyone is familiar with anything with English history, it's usually Tudor history, right? Everyone loves Henry VIII especially, and Queen Elizabeth, the last Tudor monarch. But what I know about Tudor history is not much. It's not much at all. So I was looking for something, a good catch-all Tudor history, and this seemed to have pretty rave reviews all around. This is Lucy Wooding's Tudor England, a history. And no, I don't know much about it specifically. It looks to be kind of a social and a cultural history mixed up in one, which is perfectly fine for me. I have a couple of other books about Tudor England. Susan Bridgeton's has the word Tudor in it, 1485 to 1603, which is when Henry VII defeats Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth Field, all the way to the ascendancy of James I. But this will do, I think, as a good sort of introduction to the period, which is basically the 16th century. And I'm going to read this possibly with someone else in the Discord, with Brendan, and we're going to use this as a primer to go into Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. We were also thinking about maybe reading Jeremy McCullough's biography of Thomas Cromwell before we dug into Wolf Hall 2. If you have read either one of those, if you think one would be maybe spoiler, I know he dies. I know he gets beheaded. That's not a spoiler. I'm talking about anything else that might enhance the reading experience if we read it in a particular order as opposed to another order. But let me know in the comments, because, like I said, not knowing much about the period, I would appreciate some input from people who know more. So I'm going to use this as a basic, just sort of get my feet wet. Lucy Whitting's Tutor England, a History. And second to last is a biography that looked really good and had good reviews. This is Bruce Gordon's biography of John Calvin. Bruce Gordon also has a biography, I believe, of Heinrich Zwingli, but it was sold out. Or too expensive, more than I wanted to pay. I don't remember. But I could tell you, a fair amount about a lot of Reformation figures, mostly Martin Luther and Erasmus. But Calvin is more of a black box for me. I'm really interested in learning about what he did in Geneva, basically turned Geneva into a kind of Protestant theocracy, used the up-and-coming Reformation to leverage all kinds of change in the way of laws, city councils, constitutions, ruling bodies. And, I wanted to read Carlos Ayre's The Reformations, which I've basically never heard anything bad about. But between the 3 Tutor books that are all kind of big, let's see, Hilary Mantel's Wolf Hall, the Dermot McCullough Thomas Cromwell biography, and the Lucy Whitting, they're all, somewhere between 500 and 700 pages, and with the speed I read, that's going to take at least 2 months. So I have several books on the Reformation that I wanted to get to, but we'll see in the next, 90 days or so, how much of that actually happens. And then, last, actually something from the 20th century, go figure. This is a book I've heard of by an author I've heard of. Never read anything by him, but am fascinated by the subject. I've done a lot of reading over the past year or two about the topic of liberalism, especially liberalism in the 20th century. And it just turns out that Yale University Press published this a few years ago. It is called Liberalism Against Itself, Cold War Intellectuals and the Making of Our Times by Samuel Moyn. And this looks at, as I understand it, 5 Cold War liberals writing, around the middle of the 20th century. And I know a fair amount about 4 of them. Those would be Isaiah Berlin, Gertrude Himmelfarb, Karl Popper, and Lionel Trilling. The one I don't know anything about, but whose name I recognize, is Judith Sklar, who passed away at far too young of an age and maybe didn't become as well known as she should have become, but I need to learn about, because it's just a name that sort of pings for me in my head, but if you asked me to tell you anything about her, I couldn't do it. And apparently this is about Samuel Moyn criticizing those 5 figures, Isaiah Berlin, Himmelfarb, Popper, Sklar, and Lionel Trilling, And saying that the ideals of Cold War intellectuals kind of sacrificed everything to preserving individual liberty at all costs, and how that was kind of a destructive move. Um, Without, well, there's not too much to read to you on the back. It's just blurbs, but without reading straight from the university press side, which I'm trying to not do anymore because I realize how absolutely boring that is. I can't tell you too much more about it. I am going to send this off to a friend because John is an idiot and he actually didn't check his basket before he pulled the trigger and made his order, and I actually ordered 2 of them. So, this one is getting sent off to Colorado, and I'll be reading this hopefully sometime in October, November, December for Q4. One more book for the liberalism reading project. It's not really a project, it's just something I'm informally interested in. But that is 26 or 27 minutes of stuff I got from Yale University Press last month. And I will try better in the future to keep everyone who watches this channel apprised of university book sales. I know that a lot of you appreciate it, and I apologize for not letting you know. But I will see you very soon with more book reviews and a historathon pile of possibilities too.